I bought a house from 1833 about a decade ago. It is so quaint, and I still live there. But right when I moved in, and even now every now and then, some odd and unnerving things happened. Now, this house has a family vault on the properties. That is, the original family who built the house are entombed in the vault, in the back end of our property. Creepy to most, but I love that kinds of stuff, and it drove the price of the house way down to where someone like me could afford an historic home. It was a bit run down, as the older couple from whom I purchased the house were unable to maintain it in their old age as they used to be able to. I loved historic homes, and did not plan on altering the house to the new, trendy open format. Personally, I think that the new open format is tacky beyond all hell, so old houses are the way to go for me. The very first time I entered the house after closing, once it was officially my house, I walked into the front foyer and announced myself out loud. I said whom I was, what I doing there, what my intentions were, and specifically how I was not going to knock down any walls or make any major alterations. Nothing really happened, in that moment, but still I thought it was the respectful things to do. So part of maintaining the house and the property was also visiting and maintaining the burial vault. It was built into a small hill in the back end of the property line, and had large iron door leading into the earth. I had the keys for it, but felt a little weary about entering the vault. Why would I do that? What would I do inside? Should I do that? Was this off limits to me? Etc. All these things came into my mind. The old owners, however, told me they had several old markers in the basement, which I found, that should be replaced and moved to their rightful spot in the vault. So with this information I felt I had reason to enter the vault and a sort of duty to do so. They weren't my family, but since I was now the owner of property, my maintenance should not exclude them. I brought out the old markers, and even knocked on the door. I remember feeling a little foolish doing this, but I knocked and again said who I was, why I was there, that I had several markers with me that should really be in the vault, and that I had wished to bring them to their rightful place. I said all this, nothing spooky happened. I opened the vault after a lot of effort. It probably hadn't been opened since the last burial there in the 1920s. It was a small marble room, with an arched neoclassical niche in the center wall across from the door. I brought in the two heavy stone markers and saw instantly where they should have gone in the crypt niches. Apparently they had never been installed as planned. They were too heavy to lift above my head into the niches, so I carefully placed them below the empty niches. They would have to be professionally embedded into each niche, and cemented in, so I knew at that point I would need to hire someone. I left them there and locked the vault again and left. I called a monument guy. He relayed me to another company that does grave monument maintenance, and they came after a few days and professionally installed the markers into the niches, inspected the rest of the vault, and gave me the okay regarding the vault's overall condition. That's when the odd stuff happened in the house. A friend I had came over one evening to chill and have dinner. He asked if I liked my neighbor and I said I didn't really know him/them yet, as they lived like a quarter of a mile down the road. This is the countryside, so your neighbors aren't like right next to you. I said I didn't really know them yet and had not met them in person, and thought nothing of it. We eat dinner. We're chilling on the back/side porch watching the sun dip down, having a little blaze together. My friend is on my left, which is towards the backyard. He suddenly goes, "Oh, there's your neighbor again." I asked what he means. He says, "Oh, your neighbor. He must be a walker." He points my backyard, and I look and see a man just standing there in the yard. He wasn't scary or spooky looking, but it was an unannounced man in my yard, the middle of the countryside, which was a bit alarming, but not totally irregular to see people cutting through your property if they are hunting or walking, etc. I immediately stand up and go to address this man, whom I see walking away from the property. He's gone by the time I'm off the porch walking on the grass. I think, oh, he must be the neighbor from down the way. He didn't see me get up, and I didn't say anything to him, so he's just walking back home from an evening walk. My friend said something like, "Oh yeah, I saw him earlier in the day and figured it was a neighbor or something." Didn't think anything about it at all, and we go back to blazing and chilling. We ended up talking and blazing for a few hours on the porch. It's fully nighttime now, and we decide to have a bonfire out back. My friend goes inside to get something while I stay by the fire pit setting up the paper and then the kindling. I light the fire and it starts to burn, and I can tell my friend has returned and is standing behind me. I ask something like, "Yo, can I have one of those bigger logs over there?" But he doesn't answer or hand me anything. I turn around expecting to see my friend, but it's that guy again. I totally jumped back and was like, "Hello, hi. Who are you?" Exclamation mark. He's really calm and really polite and says he's so happy with what I've done with the house. I thought this was odd as I had just moved in a few weeks ago, and had hardly done anything besides trim the hedges, clean out the gutters, have a few assessment made, and move the crypt markers into the vault. I said something like, "Oh thanks, yeah, I just moved in. Lots more to fix and restore." I asked him where he lived, who he was, politely. I ask a few indirect questions that would tell me why he was on my property so late at night. I work in mental health, so I know how to ask certain questions without the person knowing what I'm actually trying to find out. He answered in a way that was polite and kind, but totally deflected my inquiry. This guy knew what I was after, and was not answering me, and now I was starting to get creeped out. The next thing is where I was really freaked out. My friend came out from the house, and I called out to him. I looked away from the guy for 2 seconds, looked back, and he was gone again. I asked my friend if he saw me talking to someone, and he said he did see my talking to the neighbor guy and was coming out to meet him after he saw. So this wasn't in my mind that I saw him and spoke to him. I have never seen him again, and none of my neighbors turned out to be this guy. I wholeheartedly believe this guy was one of the men from the vault whose niche marker I had installed finally. I work night shift in a hospital. I also work in the basement next to the morgue. Kinda needless to say, I'm somewhat used to weird things happening, random objects falling off of shelves with no one around, flickering lights even though we're on a generator, etc, etc. None of that is really creepy in my mind, and I don't exactly believe in ghosts. One night a few weeks ago though, around 3 a.m., I heard this loud, horrid scream come from the hallway right outside. It sounded like a woman shrieking, like straight out of the movies, and it lasted for 2 to 3 seconds before stopping. It was quiet for a few seconds. I listened for a follow-up, footsteps, conversation, a thud. Kind thought someone collapsed. Nothing. Complete and utter silence followed. I waited a second before asking my coworkers if they heard what I just heard or if I was going crazy. They heard. We were all apparently just stunned silent. I checked the hallway, which is long, and saw nothing. No one could have feasibly gotten far enough for me to not see them, unless they were running, in which case I would have heard their footsteps, and all of the doors in the hall are locked because it was night shift and nothing is open, so they couldn't have escaped into a random room. I still have no idea where the scream came from. It's bone-chilling. Whatever this was sounded like it had witnessed death. I can still hear the scream in my mind. I'm not easily spooked, but that was definitely something that still baffles me and freaks me out to this day.
Last June my horse died in a tragic and horrific pasture accident. By the time she was found she was long gone, had bled out in minutes. Her body was removed, etc. And I went over to her pasture to just be. Every other horse came up to me at the fence one by one in a means of offering their condolences. Suddenly every horse turned to the west, traditionally death, where the sun sets on life, and neighed once. One long neigh returned. No horses live west of the property. I truly believe she was crossing over at that moment and saying goodbye. A lady I knew who claims to be an animal communicator told me my horse's spirit had visited her in her office in the next city over the same morning and told her she was confused but now I am okay, and that she had sacrificed herself knowing I could handle her death but not that of someone else. Not sure what to believe, but there were too many coincidences. That evening my cat grabbed a stuffed animal I had that looked just like my horse and started chewing on its left hind leg and staring at a photo of her on the wall. He hasn't bothered with either since. It was like he was acknowledging her death. Creeped me right out. My new horse lived in the same pasture but I didn't know her at the time. She was in training with the owner of the stable, so didn't really register much on my radar. I have video of both my horses together, although I never owned both at the same time.
I have 2 stories to share. Till this day I can't wrap my head around what happened. Definitely still scares me. Story 1. I was house sitting for my aunt a couple years ago. My cousin and I decided to sleep in her room. I had work the next day, so we had gone to bed pretty early, like about 9 p.m. or so. During the night I felt myself waking up a bit, so I looked over to check the time. I see that it's only 2:45, so I start trying to go back to sleep. Then suddenly I hear what I can only describe as a loud demonic screeching laugh coming from the living room. My aunt's bedroom wall faces the living room, so the noise was definitely from inside. I was going to convince myself it didn't happen until I looked over to see my cousin wide awake and equally terrified. We were so scared we called the police. It sounded like there was someone or something in the house. They searched the house and it was clear. I felt so bad wasting their time, but we were truly scared. I can't even compare it to anything. It was a demonic screeching laugh. Considered it possibly being an animal, but I have yet to hear anything similar. And the sound was in the living room, not in the backyard. I don't bother telling many people because I have a hard time explaining what was heard because I'm still trying to make some sense of this. Story 2. One night my cousin and I were in her room with the lights off. She was in the top bunk and I was on the bottom one. She had a stepping stool folded aside near her closet. I should add that there were no fans or windows opened. As we are in the room talking, she stops to ask me if the door is fully closed. As I turn to check, we hear footsteps and the stepping stool be knocked over as if someone ran into it while running out. We freak out and turn on all the lights. She said he wanted to know if the door was closed or not because she saw a shadow. The door was not closed all the way. Probably too late, but I like telling this story. A friend and I met at a gym outside of our town because this particular gym was open much later than the one we regularly go to. For whatever reason, we wanted to get a late workout in, which led to us working out at midnight. When we were done, my friend decided to head right home while I stayed to shower at the gym. When I was done, I went to my car. The parking lot was empty and pitch black. I get in my car and start to head home. As I pull out of the parking lot, this car comes out of nowhere and cuts me off. Foolishly, I roll my window down and shout some not so friendly words at the car. Immediately the car pulls a U-turn and begins to follow me. Initially I think that it's just a coincidence and that he just happens to be going my way too. But as I make more turns, he's still following. I can't see any details about the car because of the darkness, only the two headlights behind me. I start to panic. No cars are on the road except us. We are in the middle of nowhere because it's pretty much farmland on the drive back to my hometown. To ensure that I'm not crazy and that he's actually following me, I make erratic turns that no person going anywhere would make. The car follows me still. Now I'm terrified. I make another foolish mistake. I pull over and plan on confronting the driver. The car following me pulls over 20 feet behind me. I walk towards the car trying to put on brave face, yelling something along the lines of, "What do you want, man?" The car door opens. The driver gets out and it turns out it's none other than my friend who I went to the gym with. When he left the gym parking lot, he realized he didn't know the route home in the dark, so he waited for me to follow my car back home. He thought I knew it was him who was following me and that it was hilarious that I worried he was some killer I happened to piss off. I posted this on another post. I was at my dad's house. Parents are divorced, and since my dad just moved, I was still getting used to the house. I was looking around and I saw there were stairs, so I decided to go exploring, like a normal kid does when they see a dark and creepy basement. So I walked down and there are like a bunch of shelves with boxes of stuff in them, so I see that the washer is on the complete other side of the basement, so I start to walk over there. I was 8, I did not even know how to do laundry, but I guess I was curious, so I get over to the washer and all of a sudden I hear this loud boom behind me. I turn around and I see this really large box now blocking the doorway up to the first floor, and I had seen a few horror movies because my dad loves them, and I all of a sudden get a really big chill down my spine, so I turn around and no one was there, so I ran upstairs and go to bed. That night I had a really bad nightmare about someone coming up from the basement to kill me, so I didn't come back to my dad's for a long time, and before I got the chance my dad got a promotion and moved.
I was in college as a freshman and lived on an all-girls floor. One day I went to shower in the hall bathroom. I was in the shower when I reached down to grab my shampoo and notice a pair of feet in the stall next to mine on the right, wearing clearly what are men's shoes. Not wanting to make assumptions or freak myself out, I tried to forget about it. I reached down again and noticed the feet were now in the stall on my left. Slightly worried now, I stand up and pull the curtain against me to cover up a bit. That's when I hear the stall door open on my left and hear the feet walk back over to the stall on my right. Definitely feeling freaked out now, as whoever was out there would change stalls every time I bent down. I froze. Then a head starts to slide under the stall, so naturally I scream. The person then runs out of the hall bathroom. Not wanting to be ambushed coming out of the bathroom, I waited in the stall for a good 15 minutes before leaving. All I had was my towel to wrap around myself while I walked back to my room. Had to file a police report, and a week later there had been 2 other incidences on campus with other girls being watched in the shower. He was never caught. When I was a senior in high school, I lived in the same apartments as my boyfriend. One night my boyfriend hit me up at 3 in the morning to go over to his apartment to do the deed. I was half asleep walking toward his home where I saw someone in front of the manager's office, which is just across my BF's apartment. My BF is the son of the manager who is in charge of the apartments where I lived in, so in my head I really believed it was my BF because I saw this person open the screen door of the manager's office. And this person had the same stature as my boyfriend. I began yelling out "Hey" to the guy, believing that it was BF, and waving for him to come over me. For some reason the guy walked over to me, and as he came closer I began to realize it was a random stranger. At this point I was panicking. As he was nearing toward me, I told him that I mistook him as someone else. I didn't understand what he said in return because he didn't know how to speak English. I gave up trying to explain as to why I waved him over, so instead I ran to my BF's apartment. Later on that day, a neighbor of mine told me that when he was leaving to work in 3-ish in the morning, he saw a man trying to open a random window to someone else's apartment. My neighbor began yelling at the guy and the guy booked it out of there quick.
This happened a few months ago. One time I was laying in bed, chillin'. I was certain to be alone in the house, since my mother left the house some time ago and my dad was still at work. Then I heard a phone call. It was my dad, who told me he would be late. I hung up and was just about to go back to my room, but I just decided to go downstairs, for whatever reason. I went to the kitchen to grab a glass of water when suddenly I noticed something on my right. There was a woman I had never seen before, standing behind the living room door. There is a glass frame in it. She just stood there and looked at me in a weird manner. At the time, my aunt was living at our house because of illness, so I thought maybe the woman was visiting her. Since this encounter felt kinda weird though, I tried to enter the living room to find out who she was, when I noticed that the living room door was locked. I knew something was wrong here. I knocked at the door and told her to let me in. She slowly opened it. It seemed we were alone in the room, so I asked for her name and how she got inside. She didn't answer and muttered something like, "Where am I? Who's living here?" I had to ask her multiple times till she finally told me her name. I backed up slowly, considering the worst outcomes of this situation. After all, she could bluff, and if she got inside, anyone could have. I backed up slowly to check if the front door was a possible escape option. It was locked. I immediately demanded her to hand me out the keys. Luckily, she did that and also signaled me that she wanted to leave. I opened the door and let her leave. Calling the police afterwards was not optimal behavior in hindsight. In the end, it turned out she had broken out of the psychiatry and was wandering around the neighborhood. My dumbass had forgotten to plug out the keys when entering the house myself. Scary thing, she could have been inside for over an hour or so. I think about it a lot. One night I heard my little brother, Foryo, crying, like a soft cry, down the hall in his room. My family usually just lets him cry it out and he usually goes back to sleep. Well, that night he was crying for a while and I decided to go see if I could soothe him or something. I walk in and he has his face buried in his pillow. I knelt next to his bed and asked if he was alright. My brother says no and that someone from the hall was watching him. I hop onto his bed and he cuddles next to me and he's still crying softly. I told him no one was watching him and that he was safe. He says no, he's out there. I said no one is there, look. He stops crying for a second, goes to look and screams the most blood-curdling scream I have ever heard and yells yes he is, he's right there, and starts crying, but like hysterical crying. I grab him and pull him close and am totally freaking out. I look out in the halls and nothing was there. I said no one is there, what's wrong? I look down at his bed and say this ugly looking stuffed frog animal. It was situated on the foot of his bed, sitting up staring right at him. I promptly kicked it off the bed and said he's gone, he's gone. My brother looked again and did the same thing, just started screaming. I didn't know what to do, so I just sat there and held him tight until my parents showed up not too much longer after that and were able to calm him down. It sounds like a long story, but it all happened in less than a minute. When everyone was calm, we all went back to bed, but everyone said no one was able to sleep that night. I still don't know what he saw, but I guess it happened one more time after that, after I moved out. Long story. I had a friend who I had known for years and ate lunch with regularly. He was active in the Catholic Church, and voiced wanting to be a priest, which should have been a sign. Anyway, he picks me up from my home to take me to meet our friends at the mall. However, he continued driving to a remote hiking trail. This was late October in Canada. No one was hiking, it was freezing. I realize something is wrong, but I don't feel scared, just uncomfortable and unsure why he would bring me there. We begin walking the trail, and as soon as the parking lot with the single vehicle in the parking lot was out of view, he says, "I could rape you right now and no one would hear you." Immediately I went into survival instinct mode. This guy was 6 foot. I am 5 feet, 110 pounds. I know I'm at a huge physical disadvantage and I'm going to have to be smart. So, I laugh. I pretend it's a joke and continue walking. Hess behind me now, and he pulls me onto his lap on a nearby bench. He proceeded to try to make out with me, while I was talking about my boyfriend, who he knew. He says his girlfriend isn't ready for a sexual relationship, but I clearly was. I gave out these seductive vibes. He is trying to get under my top and into my pants. I allow him up my shirt. The lesser of two evils. I'm scanning for something I can use in my defense, but Jerry's only large rocks and I can't think of a way to make that work. The whole time Hess in ecstasy that he is up my shirt and doesn't notice my distraction. Finally, I say, "Jeremy, yes, you are so right and I've fought it for so long, but I want to." The look on this man's face was pure joy. Then I say, "But I've been thinking and dreaming of this moment and this isn't how I pictured it. Let's do this right. I want to make this as special as possible. Drop me at my house and he'll grab some things. Condoms. Act. And I promise this night will blow your mind." He happily obliges and drives into my driveway. I leap out, scream what the fuck, and run inside and lock the door. I was 17 in grade 12. I didn't report it to anyone because I was a stupid kid. I told my youth pastor. I didn't tell my parents. I did tell my friends, who did nothing, and most people thought I made it up. To what advantage of mine? I'm not sure. I told my long-distance boyfriend, who is now my husband. It was rough. I have PTSD from this incident and it haunts me always. Don't trust people. Just don't do it. It was actually about a month ago. A very dark and cloudy night. I was about to head upstairs before getting a late-night final snack, as I usually do. As I turn off the last light in my kitchen, I walk around in my near-pitch-black house, only the sparse moonlight to provide some sense of vision. I do this all the time, even after watching a scary movie, because I'm not really spooked easily. The last thing I usually do is check for the cat if he is outside that night. I open my large glass sliding door, give a whistle, and look for the glow of his reflecting green eyes. I see some eyes this night after my whistle. As per usual, I turn on my porch light and open the door wide. The eyes get closer. I look away at my counter as I eye some wafer cookies. I go to reach for a few steps from the glass door I was waiting for the cat at. I suddenly hear a sharp, deep bark from outside and think nothing of it. Stupid neighbor dog barking. Immediately after I turn to take a look at my cat, I see a hellhound-looking creature sprinting towards the door. My body freezes with fear as I slam the door as he hits the porch. He smashes into the door, barking furiously and slamming the glass with his paws. He appears to be some feral dog I've never seen before. He continues to jump on the door as I quickly turn off the lights and run upstairs. He continues to bark for the next hour. As I lie wide awake on my bed, me eventually leaves. But I didn't sleep that whole night, just waiting on the couch watching the door. Now I have changed my routine to turning off the lights and running upstairs as fast as possible. Haven't seen the dog since, but did call animal control about it. Don't know if had rabies or something.